Taliban control, with reports the militant group has surrounded the capital, Kabul. Also ahead, a booster shot, 1 million extra Pfizer doses arriving tonight. More than half headed for Sydney's west. While New South Wales gets blunt warnings from authorities as the virus continues to spread rapidly.
I can't stress enough the seriousness of the current situation and my grave concerns that these case numbers will continue to escalate.
And Haiti hit with a second earthquake just hours after the devastating 7.2 tremor. Hello and welcome to ABC News. I'm Miriam Korawa. Afghanistan could soon be back in Taliban control, with the militant group tonight surrounding its capital from all sides. After capturing key cities to the east and the north of the country overnight, the Taliban have swiftly moved on Kabul, the last city standing. There are reports the insurgents have it surrounded, with chaotic scenes erupting on the streets. The Taliban has directed its forces not to enter the city yet, ordering citizens to stay home. Government forces have offered little resistance, with deepening fears over the brutal regime completing its takeover. South Asia correspondent James Oaten reports.
Across the country, Afghans are waking up to a new reality. White flags are being hoisted in major cities, not as a declaration of surrender, but one of Taliban rule.
We are getting very close to the I would say to the verge of being collapsed. And it's not the collapse of a system or a government, I would say the collapse of a nation.
The Taliban has conquered more cities without any major resistance. One of those is Mazar-e-Sharif in the north. This footage shows Afghan forces that were stationed nearby swiftly fleeing for the Uzbekistan border. They leave behind residents in a city who are now facing an uncertain, perhaps frightening future. The women who wanted to pursue sport, education or a career. Those who criticised the Taliban or vowed to resist them.
The first feeling that would come to them is a fear. The fear of who's going to be executed first. Who's going to be executed for what reason?
There's also concern about how the barrage of bad news will be impacting Australian veterans who served in the country as they watch their work being undone and worry about those who helped them.
Some of the people that have contacted the various sub-branches or state branches have been very upset and indicated severely affecting their mental health.
Security is tight in Kabul, but there are already reports the Taliban have entered the capital.
That's the entry gate of Kabul. They are here. I'm not afraid of them. We are not the people who will, go back to the dark era.
Childhood I had, our little kids, I was so happy that our little kids, our little girls are not going to have the same. But now that hope is gone.
James Oaten, ABC News.
With the Taliban on the verge of seizing control of Afghanistan, Australia's military will soon embark on a dangerous mission to rescue hundreds of people from the war-torn nation. The hastily organised air bridge mission will involve RAAF planes flying to the capital, Kabul, as soon as this week. Those to be evacuated will include Afghan interpreters and contractors who served alongside our troops. Political editor Andrew Probyn has the exclusive details on the rescue mission.
This is what humiliating defeat looks like. Another provincial Afghan city taken by insurgents. The Taliban almost casual in the breakneck speed of their advance.
I think for all practical purposes, Afghanistan has fallen, and the only spot which is really left is Kabul.
The Afghan capital is in what could be the beginnings of a humanitarian disaster. Tens of thousands of people seeking refuge.
Nobody is helping us with water, food or a place to sleep.
What's happening in Afghanistan is heartbreaking.
But the Prime Minister says the job's done in Afghanistan. Osama bin Laden's dead Afghanistan's no longer used by al-Qaeda as a terrorist base. US President Joe Biden again declaring America's withdrawal is irreversible. I was the fourth president to preside over an American troop presence in Afghanistan, he said. I would not and will not pass this war on to a fifth.
The challenge of the peace and freedom of the people of Afghanistan, sadly, remain an unresolved issue. And our focus now is to ensure that we can continue to support those who have aided us.
Afghan interpreters and contractors who helped Australian troops in battle to be urgently evacuated along with their families, joining the nearly 400 who've already been brought here. The ABC understands Air Force jets will be dispatched for the extraction in the days ahead. The dangerous mission coordinated with the arrival of US and British security forces.
We have been in close consultations with our allies and security partners.
And when the troops and foreign diplomats finally retreat, what of the millions of Afghans left behind who'll face oppressive Taliban rule?
The biggest losers are going to be the younger generation of Afghan, and more specifically Afghan women.
It is very concerning to contemplate the circumstances which face those women and girls now.
Afghanistan isn't known as the graveyard of empires for nothing. It's seen off the British, the Russians, and now the Americans and NATO-led forces. The withdrawal has been hasty and unedifying, and it's still unclear if anything has been gained over the past 20 years.
Freedom is always worth fighting for.
But what if that freedom is only temporary? Andrew Probyn, ABC News, Canberra.
For more, I'm joined now by Jawed Nada, a researcher on Afghanistan who previously worked with the Afghan government and civil society organisations in Afghanistan and the United Kingdom. Jawed Nada, welcome to ABC News. We are still receiving updates on the situation on the ground there in Kabul. What's your understanding of what's happening there at the moment?
At the moment, there is panic in the city of Kabul. Residents are really fearful that any time the Taliban would be coming and taking over the city. We have just received the news that the Taliban spokesperson said that they do not want to enter Kabul violently and that they are going to seek a political settlement before entering. So that is a little relief. But that's a very little relief compared to the problems that people are facing at the moment. Kabul is a very populated city, but also recently there has been a huge influx of internally displaced people and refugees inside the city. The city infrastructure, facilities, and the support system is too meager, it's too little to provide for all these people. In Australia, we talk of the lockdown, there is, COVID restrictions. There, in open public places, but also in shops, people are cramming together to find shelter. So it's very, very horrific scenes that we see in Kabul at the moment. I have my family, part of my family in Kabul still, and I'm in touch with them, and I can't begin to imagine the problems that they're facing.
It's an incredibly desperate situation, the picture you're painting there, Jawed. In your view, you talk there of the reports that the Taliban is seeking a political negotiation to enter Kabul. What might that entail at this stage? Is there any clear idea of how that might proceed and whether that's likely to actually draw any results in terms of maintaining a non-violent presence there?
There is a lot of speculation, but to be honest, we are not privy to the behind-the-curtains negotiations that are taking place in Doha, in Qatar at the moment. But the overall speculation is that they would like to the Kabul government to surrender to the Taliban, and an interim government headed by the Taliban or to be installed, and that this will in return mean a 6 months of ceasefire throughout the country. And 6 months, it is hoped that the cornerstones, the infrastructure for a longer-term government in Afghanistan will be discussed between Taliban and the other opposition groups. Well, at the moment, the opposition group is the government of Afghanistan, but the government is also in a state of panic, and there is no clear indication of what the next move by the government will be. Some say that.
Please continue.
Some say that there are imminent resignations taking place. They say that President Ashraf Ghani might step down anytime soon. Some even thought that he would step down yesterday. So it's an extremely uncertain political and military situation in Afghanistan.
It is changing moment by moment. What do you expect would be a government led by the Taliban for the people of Afghanistan?
It's, for many, including myself, it was unimaginable only a week ago to say these things, but I fear that there will be a return of a repressive regime of Taliban in the same fashion that they ruled Afghanistan in 2000 and until 2001, 1996, 2001. There will be draconian laws in place in which the rights of individual freedoms of citizens, particularly the women's rights, will be utterly violated. Only a few days ago, the Taliban commanders who captured another major city, Faizabad of Badakhshan, they declared that the women in Afghanistan will have to adhere to the Islamic Sharia, and in the Talibani version of Islamic Sharia, women should not leave the house without a male companion. They should not enter into public life, and that they should always be satisfied with their inferior position in the society. As recently as 2 days ago, they stopped women students of Kabul, of Herat University, to attend the university. So it's only, I would say, a harbinger of extremely difficult days for women in Afghanistan, but also for any person who was fighting for dignity, who was promoting human rights in Afghanistan. It's going to be really, really difficult times ahead of them.
Certainly will. And it appears that, you know, the Taliban, they've moved so swiftly. There is little to no resistance there within Afghanistan. But also looking more broadly, what do you believe will be the significance of this situation in Afghanistan for the region and bordering nations as well?
Yes, unfortunately, it will have a knock-on effect on security and stability of region, and with that, the security and stability of the entire world. I recently saw a Taliban fighter's interview in which he said that their jihad and their holy war will not be confined to the borders of Afghanistan, and that there soon will be a time when they try to raise their flag in other parts of the world as well. So this means that not just the immediate region of Afghanistan, but to be honest, places as far as Australia will bear the brunt of this kind of Islamism that the Taliban are going to promote.
Well, we are also hearing about the military operation to evacuate people out of Afghanistan by Australia, the United Kingdom and the United States. How difficult is it likely for that operation to now go ahead safely?
It's difficult to say, but I think the priorities of Australian government, American and British governments is skewing the situation in Afghanistan. I would have loved their operation to have been named like rescuing the Afghan people or defending Afghanistan. Instead, they have opted for evacuating people, and this has negatively affected the morale of security forces, Afghan security forces, but also Afghan civilians, that only those who have been closely associated with these governments will be helped. Now, I don't say that helping them is a bad thing. I think they should be helped, but also other vulnerable population in Afghanistan, particularly human rights, women's rights defenders, minority rights defenders, they should also be helped. So I hope that whatever in future, immediate future, but as well as long-term future, the international community as a whole, but also Western countries in particular, will remain engaged with Afghanistan, provide support to the civilians, provide support to their allies, because frankly speaking, the Afghan people are not fighting an Afghan fight. It is a regional as well as international fight against terror groups. And if that battle is lost, there will be huge catastrophic implications for everyone around the world.
Well, we are already seeing huge numbers of people affected by what's been happening. More than 250,000 people displaced in the year alone, and of course civilian casualties. What do you think is required in order to see such a vast number of people getting the assistance, the support that they need at this particular time? It would require, I imagine, quite a significant global effort.
Indeed, and a global effort spearheaded by local entities, both government as well as non-government organizations who have had a track record of helping Afghan populations. So I would ask through this that all international aid agencies are supported so that they can help people in need, not just immediate humanitarian assistance, but also long-term development assistance. The problems in Afghanistan, as we know, is not a new one. So a lot of helpers in Afghanistan have already been there. So using their expertise is really key. But obviously, this will mean that a lot of resources, financial and technical resources, are needed. And I really hope that the international community can provide that. Otherwise, as we know, it will get worse from here.
Jawed Nada, we do thank you so much for speaking with us on ABC News and wish you and all your family and those in Afghanistan at this time all the very best. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Returning home, 1 million extra doses of Pfizer will start arriving in Australia tonight from an unlikely source. Poland has sold us its surplus stock, which will be rushed into the arms of young people. And about half will be directed to the COVID hotspots in Sydney. From Canberra, here's political reporter James Glenday.
In Poland, people are returning to their pre-pandemic lives. Restaurants are open and about half the population is fully vaccinated. There are, of course, still a steady number of COVID-19 cases, but the nation now has a surplus of vials to sell, and some are on their way from Warsaw to centres in Western Sydney.
The more we have, the more people will feel comfortable to come out and just walk in. I mean, I think we should have people on the street and just say, hey, have you got your vaccine? If you haven't, come in. That's how it should be.
In all, Australia has bought an extra 1 million doses of Pfizer. 530,000 will go to the Sydney suburbs hardest hit by the expanding Delta outbreak.
This is where we need to go to get further along. So it's just unfortunate that it took so long to get here.
The extra jabs will be targeted at younger people, the biggest spreaders of COVID-19, and should be enough to inoculate everyone aged 20 to 39 in the 12 Sydney local government areas where case numbers remain worryingly high. The remaining vials will be divvied up between the other states and territories.
They have to be given more vaccine in New South Wales because nothing else they're doing is working. This is where they're at now. They're going to have to vaccinate their way out of this.
The Prime Minister has been helping scour the globe, offering to pay a premium for any spare jabs.
I need you to stay at home, and you needed more vaccines from us. More vaccines are on their way. They'll be there this week, and so I need Sydney-siders to stay home so we can beat this thing.
There was substantial sensitivity around this deal, with a few senior members of the government worried the European Union could scuttle it last minute. Some people close to the vaccine rollout have likened the purchase of surplus jabs to buying meat on special at a supermarket. They're still useful, indeed life-saving, but their expiry is often shorter, and so they need to get into arms more quickly. And of course, getting extra vials from Eastern Europe does appear to be at odds with Scott Morrison's original assertion that Australia was at the front of the vaccine queue.
It is just growing and growing and growing, the number of infections. I just hope it's not too late.
But in New South Wales, there's hope this can be the circuit breaker that'll swiftly boost vaccination rates in Sydney.
Honestly, I hope so, because not a lot of young people are being encouraged at the moment, so I hope so.
And in the hardest hit areas, any extra assistance right now is welcome. James Glenday, ABC News, Canberra.
Case numbers in New South Wales may have slightly eased down today, but they prompted the strongest statement yet from the Chief Health Officer, Dr. Kerry Chant. Summed up in 3 words: stay at home. 4 more people have died in this outbreak, all were from southwestern Sydney. Across the state today, there were 415 new cases. Less than a fifth are known to have been in isolation for their entire infectious period.
The entire state now has a lockdown to bear.
I can understand your sense of frustration that we're still where we are.
Cases were down on yesterday's, but still the second highest for the state. And Dr Chant insists we've come to a fork in the road.
This is a choice, and I am urging the community to take the path where we see increasing vaccination coverage and declining case numbers. Otherwise, the outcome will be so serious.
Yesterday was an absolute wake-up call.
Today, the death toll has risen again. 4 people from southwestern Sydney have died. 3 women aged in their 50s, 70s and 80s, as well as a man in his 80s.
I personally do not want to see escalating numbers of deaths and hospitalisation, and it does require all of us to act and adhere urgently.
Of the 415 new cases, less than half can be linked. 42 were infectious in the community, and it's unknown whether a further 273 of the cases were in isolation.
I cannot describe my concern level if we do not drive these cases down.
The explanation for the escalating cases is the virus is spreading through workplaces and non-compliance of the rules.
We're still finding that people are visiting each other, and we're still finding that workplace transmissions are set off. We have to break that cycle.
But I think all of us accept that completely eliminating Delta is something that is near impossible. But what we desperately need is to get those numbers as low as possible to make it safe.
It's just unclear what is possible and what will be considered safe. This heightened level of concern has seemingly refocused Gladys Berejiklian on reducing cases. Even so, she's not backing away from her promise to ease some restrictions if the state meets her 6 million vaccine target in just over 2 weeks.
Me, as well as members of the team, are very keen to see us provide additional things you can do in September and October in a safe way if you're vaccinated.
Major changes won't be made, though, until 70% of the adult population is fully vaccinated, which is forecast for the end of October. Ashley Raper, ABC News, Sydney.
The virus is continuing to spread rapidly through Western Sydney suburbs, alarming health officials. To try to stop the spread, compliance is being stepped up with more police and ADF personnel on the ground. Tim Swanston is in Merrylands. Tim, what areas are of most concern?
Well, Miriam, it's very much Western Sydney that's on highest alert. In the southwest of Sydney, in Fairfield and Canterbury Bankstown, we've largely seen cases start to flatten. That curve there is certainly nowhere as steep as it was. However, here in Western Sydney, in the local government areas of Cumberland, in Blacktown and Penrith, we're seeing quite a rapidly rising curve as cases continue to increase. It's prompted an increased crackdown by police on compliance, both in these local government areas of concern and outside. So outside the local government areas of concern in Greater Sydney, there's going to be a 5-kilometre rule for shopping and exercise, or within people's own local government area. The Force living up to their recent promise. Several officers swiftly surround this man who's allegedly refusing to obey the health orders. The strong response, a sign of the urgent crackdown on compliance.
We need 100% of people to stay at home and comply with the orders. Not 90%, 100%.
Weeks into lockdown, police are still breaking up parties. More than 30 young people were sprung gathering in Clovelly.
A bunch of people having a party down there, which they're not allowed to because of lockdown restrictions. Probably not the best idea to have a rave now.
The Cliffside party has the thin blue line seeing red. 8 others were fined over a house party at Jesmond in Newcastle, and 10 people were fined for a barbecue at Blacktown.
I would love to go to a barbecue lunch with my friends and family, but now is simply not the time.
A police operation with greater penalties starts at midnight tonight. Police and troops will continue going door to door, and highway patrol officers will set up roadblocks around Sydney.
There is simply nowhere for you to go if you want to breach public health orders.
Western Sydney had the most cases today, 167, with just under 100 in the southwest. Blacktown LGA recorded 84, Cumberland 55 and Penrith 40. A row of suburbs starting in Auburn and stretching northwest to Mount Druitt have been singled out as key suburbs of concern. More than 5 million jabs have been given out across the state, and extra Pfizer supplies are on the way. They'll be directed to clinics and GPs here in Sydney's west to vaccinate mobile young people. Tradies were vaccinated in a blitz today as part of new rules for construction workers in the LGAs with tougher restrictions. Younger workers were given Pfizer, some not so willingly.
I mean, I'm not really happy about it. Don't really want to be getting stabbed with a needle.
It's not very fair because we already have the job, but we have to get it to keep our job.
I'm happy to get it. It's going to help improve things, so I'm more happy to get it and go back to work.
Like it or not, it's increasingly the linchpin to lifting the lockdown. Tim Swanston, ABC News, Sydney.
The cluster in Western New South Wales is still growing. There were 21 new cases in Dubbo, where our reporter Molly Gorman is tonight. Molly, so more concerns there for Dubbo, but some good news out of Walgett tonight.
Yes, Miriam, some good news for Walgett, that small town in the remote northwest of the state that authorities are particularly worried about. But the good news, there were no new cases today, so only 4 active cases there still. However, in Dubbo, as you said, 21 new cases, and we're now up to 35 venues of concern here locally. There are also 8 schools across the Western New South Wales local health district which have been impacted by this growing outbreak. 7 of them are here in Dubbo, but the latest one is the Mudgee High School in Mudgee, which will be shut tomorrow for deep cleaning. Of course, it's not the same across the whole state. This is the first day of this regional statewide lockdown for some areas which haven't actually had a case in many months.
You have three salmon, one dozen of each oyster.
This seafood restaurant in Port Macquarie is one of many across the state scrambling to adapt to the new reality.
Had to cancel over 400 people yesterday with a 2-hour notice for the lockdown.
They're trying to sell as much of their stock as possible before it goes off, and locals are doing their best to help.
We put it out to Port Macquarie, and here they are in droves, just giving us that support once again.
Like Port Macquarie, Bega is currently COVID-free, and the snap nature of yesterday's announcement took businesses by surprise.
If they do their live meetings at 11 o'clock, tell us everything in that meeting so we're all aware of it, rather than leaving it till 3 o'clock in the afternoon and then everybody's panicking.
We've known and we've seen already with what we did in Orange, a sharp, hard lockdown early has meant that we've seen freedom come back to regional New South Wales even sooner.
For this week at least, schools in all parts of the state will be moving to remote learning, and that will provide extra challenges in some areas.
There are pockets of New South Wales which don't have great internet connectivity, and our schools are cognizant of that. And what they're doing in those locations is personally delivering or having from school collected learning packs.
Remote learning could last longer than a week in Western New South Wales, where more fragments of the virus have been found in sewage.
Burke, Parks, Mudgee and Lennox Head continue to be of concern.
2 new cases have been confirmed in Mudgee, while another 21 cases have been recorded in Dubbo. Locals are doing their bit to try and curb this outbreak, with more than 4,500 tests conducted in Dubbo on Saturday alone. However, overnight a child was admitted to the Dubbo Base Hospital, and concerns remain about access to vaccines in remote towns.
8% in 2021, government, pull your finger out.
The Commonwealth says additional doses of Pfizer are being fast-tracked to the region in what's become a race to stay ahead of the spread. Molly Gorman, ABC News, Dubbo.
The ACT has recorded 2 new cases of COVID-19, taking the total number of active cases in Canberra to 9. Close to 6,000 tests were conducted in Canberra yesterday, setting another single-day record. Testing centres are busy again today as the list of exposure sites grows to more than 50 locations. The Chief Minister, Andrew Barr, is confident about high testing numbers but remains concerned about new exposure sites.
First case is a man in his 20s and unfortunately at this point there are no obvious links to other cases. So an investigation is underway to determine how this man became infected. The other case is linked back to the Fiction nightclub site. So this is also concerning. So it's essential that anyone who was at the Fiction nightclub at the exposure times gets tested and remains isolated. There are a number of new exposure sites across the Territory. Those have been updated on the ACT COVID-19 website.
Victoria's Premier says the signs aren't good that the lockdown will end this Thursday as the outbreak continues to spread. There were 25 new cases in Victoria. The source of 4 of them is still under investigation and 13 of the new cases were not in isolation. Those results are off the back of more than 32,000 tests, but authorities want to see more tests rolling through to be able to get on top of the mystery infections. Victoria's COVID Commander Jerome Weimar says we're now at a tipping point in this outbreak as new clusters continue to grow, and that means Lockdown 6 may have to be extended again.
A takeaway pub crawl through Richmond organised on social media. It's scenes like this which have authorities on edge and the Premier exasperated.
There's Tier 1 and Tier 2 exposure sites in Richmond. There's been cases in Richmond. The notion that you'd be wandering around Richmond... Anyway...
As Lockdown 6 drags on, Melburnians are finding new ways to get together, like this street gathering in Northcote.
If you're collecting food and drinks from a venue, you need to collect them and move on and do not linger around those venues.
With 13 of today's 25 new locally acquired cases out in the community while infectious and 4 new mystery cases in Middle Park, Dandenong, West Footscray and St Kilda East, the spread across Melbourne continues.
It's the fact that we've now got 3-4 significant clusters that are being generated that we now have to focus on. And that's the area of concern at the moment, and that's why this is a real tipping point.
There are now nearly 500 public exposure sites across Greater Melbourne. Residents at a Carlton public housing tower are being tested after COVID traces were detected in wastewater linked to the building. Those living at the Ariel apartments know all too well the COVID risk after Sydney removalists infected residents and put their building into hard lockdown. Another group of removalists who visited the apartments this week were reported to police after residents claimed they were not wearing masks correctly.
How can they be so tone deaf to be back in the building where we were locked down without any consideration for their mask etiquette?
As the number of mystery cases grow, hope is quickly fading on the lockdown ending this Thursday night. The Premier says it is too early to make the call as the state is not yet on top of the outbreak.
And we just want the Premier to be upfront with us. Just tell us how much longer does he think we are going to be locked down for, what those conditions will be.
I know no one's enjoying this, but what's worse than this? Well, being locked up till the end of October, or indeed the end of November, because that's how long it may well take to get 80% of people through the vaccination program.
The government is now opening up another 84,000 appointments at state-run vaccination hubs as it strives to achieve 1 million doses within 5 weeks. Yvette Gray, ABC News, Melbourne.
Security along the Queensland-New South Wales border has been tightened as authorities monitor the outbreak to the south. Since 8 p.m. last night, border residents can only enter Queensland for essential goods and services which are unavailable in New South Wales. The Queensland Premier says police will be tougher to ensure Delta cases don't jump the border.
We worked very hard yesterday late afternoon into the evening to get extra police presence down there. Now, because all of New South Wales is in a lockdown position, there should be very minimal movement over that border, and that extra police presence will ensure
that we will do everything we can to keep Queenslanders safe.
Let's return to our breaking news this hour. The Afghan Interior Ministry says Taliban militants have begun entering the capital Kabul from all sides. In a statement, however, the Taliban says it doesn't plan to take Kabul by force as sporadic gunfire echoes across the city. These are live pictures from Kabul, and this is the view of the US Embassy as the nation plans to evacuate diplomats from the city. The first US Marines from a contingent of 3,000 arrived on Friday to help partially evacuate the embassy. And in news just in, President Ashraf Ghani is holding emergency talks with US and NATO officials. We'll have more on developments from Afghanistan as soon as they come to hand. International aid is being rushed to the Caribbean nation of Haiti following a powerful earthquake that's killed at least 304 people. Hundreds more are still missing after the magnitude 7.2 quake sent buildings, including homes and hotels, crashing to the ground. A month-long state of emergency has been declared, with many still recovering from the devastating earthquake a decade ago.
Panic filled the streets moments after the quake struck without warning in the morning local time. In an instant, households were reduced to rubble, trapping people under heavy debris. Terrified families working quickly to rescue their loved ones. This little boy was among those saved, pulled out, seemingly unharmed. This man was also pulled out alive. He's among the many seriously injured who are now fighting to survive.
Unfortunately, we've recorded 1,800 injured people. Some of them are in hospitals, and others have been taken to specialist medical centres.
Those medical facilities are now facing major challenges. With their buildings damaged, some are treating their bedridden patients outside. Some of the luckier ones are being airlifted out for treatment.
We need assistance from the authorities, help from the international community and from the NGOs.
The quake's epicentre was around 125 kilometres from the capital Port-au-Prince. It was felt as far away as Jamaica and Cuba.
I felt the earth was moving. I saw that everything was falling. And when I got home, I realised the extent of the damage.
This live-streamed church service was underway when the tremors started. Soon, homes were tipped on their sides and lives upended. The destruction wasn't limited to the bigger centres, with some smaller coastal communities also hit hard. Haiti was still recovering from the devastating quake of 2010 that killed 220,000 people. With hundreds still missing from this latest one, the country is bracing for even more tragic news. Jenny Lavelle, ABC News.
Queensland Olympians and Paralympians will get the keys to the city at a welcome home parade in Brisbane in October. The celebration will mark one of Australia's most successful Olympic campaigns. More than 400 Australian Olympians brought home 17 gold, 7 silver and 22 bronze medals. Brisbane Lord Mayor Adrian Schrinner said the athletes inspired us all during lockdown.
Our city proud, these local athletes, and they deserve that honour. It's the highest honour the city can provide to anyone, and they have well and truly earned it.
Queensland athletes will take part in a parade in the Queen Street Mall on the 8th of October. Let's take a quick look at the weather in the capital cities for tomorrow. Brisbane, mostly sunny. Sydney, sunshine. Canberra, partly cloudy. Melbourne, showers. Hobart, some rain. Adelaide, partly cloudy. Perth, clear. And Darwin, sunny with a top of 35. And recapping our breaking news this hour, Afghanistan appears set to fall back into Taliban control, with reports militants are entering Kabul on all sides. In a statement, however, the Taliban says it does not plan to take Kabul by force, as sporadic gunfire is echoing across the city. The President, Ashraf Ghani, is holding emergency talks with US and NATO officials. You've been watching a national edition of ABC News. If you'd like to watch your local edition, just go to iView, where you can stream it live or catch up anytime. I'm Miriam Korawa. Thank you for your company.
This week